morning. It is good to be with you this morning. I'm glad that you're here with us today. If you're visiting, we want to take a moment to say welcome to Spring Creek. We're glad that you're here. This is a place that you can meet Jesus. He is on the move in this place. We understand that God is at work, and we're glad that you're here. We'd ask that you stick around after services. Let us meet you face to face, shake your hand, and say welcome, because we are so very glad to have you this morning. We are in the second of a series this month about Christians and media choices. And so I'll ask you to turn over to Matthew chapter 16, but I've got a question or two. One is, how did your media fast go this week? Did you fast from a form of media this week for at least one day? A couple of you did. I heard from more of you than that. They just must not be here. I took a fast for a couple of days from different forms of media just to see. It's interesting to hear how you worked that last week. Interesting to hear what you had to say about that last week. The most interesting one that I strangely enough, read on Facebook was, yeah, I know, it just sounds ridiculous. I struggled with that. I fasted today from Facebook, and then when I got back on to catch up, we began to look. It was amazing how many people were talking about what they were doing. I was fasting from this, or I'm fasting from that. I'm giving this up for the day, giving that up for the day. And, so anyway, I go back to that. But one person gave up texting for a day. And I thought, I didn't think about that as a form of media. But it really is. it involves a screen. It involves where I'm plugged in at. And so it's a form of media. And I thought, well, maybe I ought to fast from texting for a day. And then I didn't. Yeah. And I'm going to try that this week. I don't know how I'm going to do that, because I got to look at that going, I text a lot. It's amazing why we do those things, and I want you to see why we do those things. We do those things and we share those things with each other so that you and I can see where it is that we're allowing God to have control, and so that we grow in our awareness of what it is that God needs to be in control of. And so I think that that's been a good thing. I'm proud of you for having taken a day and given up at least one form of media. Try to do that periodically. Take a day and say, I'm going to give this up today. I'm going to let God be in control of this today. And see how we do, walking away from the influence of the world and walking closely with God in that place. I'm proud to be a part of Spring Creek and the family here. You're doing a great job. You look like Jesus. That's our resolution this year, isn't it? That we look like Jesus. As part of our resolution, we want to talk this month about looking like Jesus in our media choices. And so today, we want to talk about From Here to Eternity. Did you ever see the movie? From Here to Eternity? It's a terrible movie. Don't watch it. Pick the title. It's a great title because I think it fits in with what we're talking about. From Here to Eternity is a 1953 drama about a soldier who is transferred to the island of Hawaii. It's just before the bombing of Pearl Harbor. He is a boxer who's left behind boxing, and he gets to this base, and his commander wants him to step back into boxing, and he's trying to make good choices, and he's trying to do well, and he's trying to change his future and change where it is that he's come from, and he is surrounded by immorality. He is surrounded by people who are cheating on their husbands and cheating on their wives. He's surrounded by folks that are not making good decisions, people who are angry, people who are hateful, people who are... And he's trying to make good decisions. It's a movie that really highlights the fact that when we try to do the right thing, we struggle in the world. Because the world looks at us and says, I want to show you that things are okay. It is okay for you to be in love with somebody other than your spouse. It is okay to have sex outside of marriage. It is okay to do things to your body that will destroy who you are and where you're going and what you believe. God does not want us to believe that, does he? God does not want us to believe that what the world says is true is true. God calls us to think differently. God calls us to live differently. God calls us to be different because God is changing us, is transforming us to be something different. God is calling us to Christ-likeness. And he's transforming our nature and our character to mirror that. In Matthew chapter 16, Jesus is with his disciples. And in verse 21, we get an insight into sort of the situation that Jesus is living in. Sometimes I think we look at Jesus and go, he is the Son of God, he has come, he is teaching. But in Matthew chapter 16, I think there's a struggle here. In verse 21, it says, "From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, chief priests, and teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life." Do you think Jesus struggled with death? Do you think Jesus looked at this moment and said, "Man, I don't want to do that"? That's a scary moment. That's a moment that I don't have to deal with. I think if we go ahead and look at the garden, we see that that's a truth. And so what Jesus does, he goes to the disciples and says, I need to explain what it is that's going to happen. I need to talk to you about what it is that's going on. I need to talk to you about what it is that's on my heart and how it's going to affect you and what it means for the future and what it means for a time period later on. And so Jesus gets with these guys that he's walked with, that he's close to, that are his friends, and he lays out his heart there. And in verse 22, here's what his friends do. Peter took him aside and said, "It'll be okay, Jesus. Things are going to be all right. I know it's a hard time, but we're going to support you." No, that's not what it says, is it? It says, Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. "Never, Lord," he said, "this shall never happen to you. What are you thinking about? This can't happen to you. If this happens to you, then everything we worked for is done. If this happens to you, then all the stuff that we have gone through may be for now. What do you mean you're going to die? This is not that kind of a time. You got this great power. We've seen you heal the sick. We've seen you raise the dead. You need to stop talking like that. You need to stop doing that." Jesus listens as Peter lays out an argument, as Peter rebukes him, as Peter says, "Stop talking that way." And then in verse 23, Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan." Powerful rebuke. Get behind me, Satan. This is the thinking that's going on. This is a message that's not a godly message. You are trying to impose on me something that is not from God. And what needs to happen with that is we need to put that behind us. Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the things of God, but the things of men. And I think there's the crux of what we're going to talk about today. As Jesus listens to what Peter has to say, as Jesus takes in information, as Jesus opens himself up with his struggles and what it is he deals with, Jesus points out that there is a message from God and that there is a message from men, and they don't match up. And as Christian people, as disciples of Christ, you and I are always, always, always looking to see how it is that God is speaking to us. You and I are always looking to see what it is that God is doing to encourage us. You and I are not created, we do not live in a relationship with God in order to stand and soak up what the world says. And yet that's exactly what the world's media tries to do to us, isn't it? Media gives us information. Media gives us images. Media gives us an agenda. Media tells us what the world thinks. It tries to get us to think like the world wants us to think. And God says we've got to be careful about what it is that we put in our heads. We've got to be careful about what it is that we listen to. We've got to be careful about what it is that we are taking in and what it is that's going on. Christians have to be aware of who they are. Christians have to understand that media choices count, right? So as Jesus continues to speak, he says this. Jesus said to his disciples, "If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me." I want to talk about those three things this morning. See, this is one of those passages that lines out real well for the preacher. 3 points, I got a poem at the end, we're good to go. Right? No, I don't have a poem. But I do have 3 points. And the 3 points are the ones that we covered last week that we're going to cover all month. The first one is be aware. And I think in this place Jesus says, be aware that you are eternal beings. See, when Jesus says deny yourself, he says, I want you to look at what it is that you want, what it is that you desire, because you are men, because you are people, because you are mortal, and I want you to step away from those things. I want you to step away from what the world tells you is all right. We have certain feelings because we are people.